graduating class, you have all experienced the disruption caused by COVID. You witnessed the absurdity of a brutal war taking place in the 21st century between affluent nations. You're seeing a world where few leaders, and in such a situation, where there seems to be no certainty but only shades of grey, how does it make sense for me to tell you to go out into the world holding fast to your ideals? But my answer to that would be a resounding yes, because it may in fact be the only way to make sense of a world in which the ground under your feet feels like quicksand. And because all of you are in a unique position to apply those ideals to your work right away, because you've all taken a decision to follow a career path that is going to have a wider impact on global issues than almost any other career, rather than accepting it as it is. And human beings have never stopped aspiring to this ideal, no matter how messy the reality may be. And that's why the whole world loves it when David beats Goliath, when the good guy wins and the bad guy gets his comeuppance. May not always work that way in real life, but that's how we, as human beings, want it to be. How can you hold fast to that ideal, to the ought? And that's where I think the centrality of purpose comes in. Cynics scoff at phrases like the power of purpose, but I have to tell you, in my experience, it works. Let me share the story of my own business. Mahindra and Mahindra was founded by two brothers, as Rachel mentioned, around the time of independence. It was a time when Indian industry was practically non-existent, and many people, most notably Winston Churchill, did not expect India to survive or to be able to mold itself into a viable country. And we Indians begged to disagree, setting out to prove that Indians could in fact build a new nation. And in fact, when the company commenced business, the first advertisement they came out with in 1945 had nothing to do with products or services. They only articulated their dreams for India, a set of principles and ideals with which they were starting business. And that was in 1945. Over the years, obviously, India has confounded the naysayers and shaped itself into the world's largest democracy. However, in the early 90s, India and Indian industry were both in crisis. Faced with the prospect of running out of foreign exchange reserves, India took the radical step of liberalizing its closed economy, and after decades of being protected, suddenly the world's most powerful companies were at our doorstep, anxious to get a temptingly large piece of the Indian pie. For old economy companies like ours, which had prospered under a protectionist regime and had forgotten really how to compete, the opening up of the Indian economy was like the Grim Reaper knocking at the door. And seriously, there were people around, large consultancy firms, who were busy writing our epitaph. And yet, 3 decades later, here we are, a multi-billion-dollar group, still chugging along and earning goodwill while we do so. So how did we do it? Well, obviously, there were many ingredients. But to my mind, the most important one was to harness the power of purpose. We found ourselves in a very strange back to the future kind of situation, where once again we had to prove that we as an Indian company could do it, that we could not just survive, but thrive in the changed economic landscape. And drawing upon an Indian narrative and upon our corporate history, we first elucidated a core purpose that would galvanize people to come to work in the morning and give of their best. Now that core purpose was simply to say, Indians are second to none, and we will make products that will prove that to the world. I know that sounds terribly parochial, but please understand, at that time it was a cry to shed the most invisible, pernicious, and lingering feelings of inferiority and a lack of self-belief, which was the bequest of colonialism. And that really had an electrifying effect on our people. It triggered the David versus Goliath sentiment. It tapped into our collective memories of our founding days, where we had succeeded against all odds because we had something to prove. And it fueled our self-belief. I know that sounds warm and fuzzy, but it contributed to concrete results. Between 2002 and 2013, our profits went up 33 times. Our stock price went up 72 times. Now that took a lot of hard work. But that hard work came about because people were motivated by a sense of purpose. Today, our core purpose has changed. We recognize that as we became transnational, we needed a more global and a more inclusive rallying cry. Now, our core purpose is almost as compact. It is to drive positive change in the lives of our communities to enable them to rise. And we often encapsulate that in just the one single word, rise. Now, how that credo precisely evolved is a longer story, but let me tell you that if you asked any one of our 250,000 strong global family what it is that differentiates our company, what it is that gets them to come into work every day, they will say it's our purpose. There's extraordinary alignment around that credo. And I want to underscore the fact that we adapted our purpose to new realities. I believe it's important to accept that purpose can evolve and it can transform, because many of the problems of the world that I alluded to earlier simply arose out of rigid and immutable mindsets. Now, I'm a hard-headed businessman, not an armchair philosopher, but personal experience has taught me never to underestimate the power of purpose in business or in life. And there's no shortage of role models. But I'm not talking about larger-than-life cliched icons. And even before you set out to change the world, which Fletcher no doubt has prepared you to do, I urge you all to take small steps to change the world around you. Perhaps your purpose, like Mahindra's, will also evolve over the course of your life. But one of the privileges of attending an institution like this is the opportunity to step outside the familiarity of your lived experiences, make sense of the bigger picture and of the space that you occupy within it. I myself am inspired almost every single day by people who possess this understanding, who are committed every day to living with empathy, and possibly without ever knowing how impactful they have been. So let me share with you one more personal story. Decades ago, we were in a taxi, rushing to get my then one-year-old daughter to surgery for a hand injury that she had suffered. And my wife and I were beside ourselves with anxiety. My daughter was throwing a tantrum, and the taxi driver clearly picked up on our anxious and tense state. "May I share an old saying with you?" he quietly asked us. And he said, if everyone's problems were like laundry hanging out to dry in an open field, and you had the opportunity to go out into that field and exchange your laundry, your problems, in other words, with anyone else's, you would still choose your own problems. And he paused and he just said quietly, "Don't worry, I'll get you there safe and sound and in time." And at that moment, it was precisely the perspective that I needed. The surgery was a success, and to this day, I look gratefully to that